All right, welcome to the Misfit Nation. George Siegal, I'm sorry. George is the owner of Move the World Films and has directed and produced The Last House Standing and Licensed to Parent. He also created Move the World podcast. How are you, George? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing very well, thanks. How are you today, Rich?
Very well today. Like I said earlier, we're all upright today. It's good things here in Tennessee.
Yeah.
So, George, tell us a little bit about your backstory. How did you get into filmmaking, or why did you want to become a film company owner?
Well, I was in the TV news business for a number of years. I was a weatherman, hosted a morning show. I did a sports trivia game show. I did a bunch of different things. And, there's the nice thing about being in that business is you get paid well. The downside is you've got some corporate muckety mucks telling you what you can do and not do all the time. And you're just doing the same thing every day. And so when I got out of that business, I wanted to start my own business where I could create things and do things. And so I started a video production company, eventually evolved into making documentary films. And I've made 2 documentaries so far. The Licensed to Parent, which is about the parenting problem in this country and how anybody can be a parent with no requirements whatsoever. And we see the cost of that on a daily basis. And then The Last House Standing, which is about how we build houses in places that are vulnerable and we're just ripe for disaster when a major weather disaster occurs. And, and it's the same cycle year after year of people getting destroyed by major storms and then having to rebuild. And the film focuses on, are we building to a high enough standard? Now, with the disaster that just happened in Kentucky and where you guys are in Tennessee, if you're a bullseye of a major tornado, there's probably nothing that's going to help you. That's what the experts in our film said. But when you look at the center of where the tornado hits and then fan out to the left and the right, how far would you get from that center? How your house is built or your business is built can have a major factor on whether or not it gets destroyed. And the code's pretty weak in a lot of areas. So it's tragic for what happened there, but it's going to be interesting for them to study what could have been different. But a lot of that is just horrific to look at.
Right, definitely. And a few years ago when Harvey hit Houston, I was about to move to Houston at the time with my old job. And I went down there looking at houses, came back, Harvey hit. So I went back with my job to help remediate some stuff. I went to a woman's house, and it was the 3rd time her house was basically hit with the floods. And had to rebuild the whole inside out. So insurance wasn't paying anymore because it's been done twice before to the same house. But she had no recourse to leave because of her current situation financially.
Sure. And a lot of people in Houston with Harvey, tragically, were not in a flood zone. So they could have purchased flood insurance for an affordable price. You know, if you're in a flood zone and your house isn't built to the proper standard, it's a fortune to have flood insurance. But if you're outside the flood zone for $300-400 a year, you can probably get a policy that will cover you. And that's what we're seeing in a lot of places around the country now. We saw it with one of the hurricanes this year that hit the Gulf Coast and didn't do a lot of damage there. But when it got up into the northeast part of the country, did an incredible amount of damage where people never thought they would be affected by a storm like that. And so the point of our film is really, you've got to be your own best advocate in every aspect of your life. You have to know what your insurance is, what the structure you're living is, what your vulnerabilities are, how you would evacuate if there was a disaster, what your chances are of surviving it. There's so many things, but most people don't think about that until after a disaster. And then it's too late at that point.
Yeah, it's definitely too late after. We first moved back here. We moved here from Korea in 2010, just after the 1,000-year flood hit here in Middle Tennessee, Nashville, all Middle Tennessee got flooded out pretty bad in 2010. So we got here about a month later, and they were basically still mucking stuff out at the time and saying, "Oh, this house is fine. You can move in here." I was like, "The river's right there. I don't want to live right next to a river. After what just happened, I don't want to do that. Let's move a little further away." And then when we bought our house, they said, "Do you want flood insurance?" "Yes, I want flood insurance." So it was an option, but we took it right away.
Well, I used to live in San Antonio, Texas, and there were storms there when hurricanes would hit. A lot of times when there's a lot of rain, we wouldn't get the damage from the wind, but we would have flooding. And people who live 2 miles from a river would have flooding. That's how high the water would rise. So you need to know so many different factors. Where are the water sources? Is there a dam upstream of where you live? That was one of the problems with Harvey. And you really have to do your due diligence to know all these things, because the realtor's not going to tell you. They're not going to tell you anything. They want to sell a house.
Right.
They might tell you, if you ask, what are the schools like? It's probably in the listing, but nobody is going to save you like you can save yourself. And there are resources on our website, thelasthousestanding.org, that you can go and find out what flood zone you're in, what you can do to possibly fix up your house. It's a lot of information that people should really digest. And you have to take it seriously. You can't just say, oh, it's a pretty house. I love the countertops and it's got a nice backyard for the kids to play in. You got to know more than that.
You got to understand third order effects if something happens at that point. Buying a house
Absolutely.
it's a big event, life event, buying a house, and you don't want that house to just go because you didn't take care of it or have the right precautions in place to help you later.
Right. And if you don't do the work, nobody's going to do it for you. And then once the disaster happens, you've got to deal with the criminal element that comes in trying to rip people off after a disaster, because now people are trying to profit off of your misfortune. And, you know, when we went to Mexico Beach after Hurricane Michael, there were people that rolled up there and for $10,000 were telling people they could put a tarp on their roof to stop the water from getting in. Wow. I mean, if you went on a normal day and had somebody do that, might be a couple $100 to throw a tarp up there, $10,000. But when water's pouring into your house and all your stuff's getting ruined, that's a white knight that's there to help you. And a lot of times those people are not what they appear to be. And, you know, we met some people that were shady people when we were there that were showing us around that ended up ripping off some of the homeowners. They would take their insurance over. So the insurance company had to pay them to do the work. And then they didn't do the work. So it's just, once you are a victim, you really lose control of your destiny at the time when you're most vulnerable. And that's what's heartbreaking, is because you have a family, you have to get to work, you have to get your kids to school, you don't have it. It just, everything spirals. And all the people we talked to in the Last House Standing, the common theme was they never thought it would happen to them. And then once it did, it's very hard to recover from.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, they're the wolves in sheep's clothing that come down there to help, or the white knight coming down on their horse saying, we'll help you. And they usually prey on the person that is probably at their weakest point in their life at that point. And
yeah, I like to say, I compare it to if you've ever been out in the field at night and you put a flashlight on or put a light on, and all the insects and things that come out of the woodwork and they're just drawn to that light. That light is you in a disaster. And then everything's coming at you because you're going to get good people. There's the first responders are usually awesome. And the people that are there to help you, there's a good nucleus of people, but it's the ones that are there to prey on you that just, we hear stories all the time. It happens every time there's a disaster. It brings out the good and the bad in people.
Definitely. And a lot of bad comes out of every disaster that happens. You're going to have that bad element. From, you've seen it in 2005 with Katrina. It was horrible in Katrina across the whole Gulf Coast there. And then Harvey was the next highlight in that region of large storms after that. And then now we're having all these other weather events throughout the entire country now, where you just see this prey out there, and they're like the sheep are getting chased by the wolves a lot now.
Yeah. And, you know, on my Move the World podcast, which is, I set up this podcast to have people on. And the goal is there's people out there that in their job or in their life are doing something to make the world a better place for other people. So if you have an idea or a thought of something you want to do, these are people that are doing those things, and it inspires you to try your ideas and to get out there and do things. And some people I've had on are climate experts, and they talk about, you know, climate change and global warming and how the earth is changing and the effects it has on people. And, you know, even if you talk about something like climate change, it becomes a political argument, with one side saying, oh, it's not a big deal. The other side saying, oh, we have to do something dramatic. And my point with the podcast and with my films is, okay, let them argue about that. Even if they argue about it and try to solve the problem, it may not be solved in our lifetime. Meanwhile, you could be destroyed and wiped out by storms 50 times over if you're not prepared. So the fact that there's so much debate over such an issue, which shouldn't be a controversy, it should be pretty black and white, is the signal for us to say, well, we have to control our own destiny. We can't just sit around and wait for somebody to tell us, okay, yep, the storms are getting worse, you better move away from there. No, you need to do your work and find these things out. Let the experts hash this stuff out. And, you know, if you have a chance to vote, that's where you can weigh in. Or if there's a chance to lobby for stronger building codes, that's where you can weigh in. But you can't let the argument stop you. You can't just get in an argument with somebody about, Yeah, I think climate change is horrible. We have to start using paper straws. And that's not going to solve the problem. That's really not. We got to do more than that.
And the paper straws will actually hurt the problem because you're taking away some of the trees that help us at that point by making the paper. So,
And they ruin a smoothie. If you're trying to drink a
exactly.
smoothie with a paper straw, it sucks. So
It ends over.
literally,
it's horrible.
yeah, or it doesn't suck, I guess you could say. Yeah, it's pretty bad.
So you had a pretty diverse career moving up, weathercaster, newscaster. Then you said sports trivia. That's a pretty cool thing. Well, I'm sure it was great in bars and stuff, or at parties at house parties and stuff. And then
there was a show called Time Out for Trivia. And we were the financial news network on weekends was a sports network. And we would do this show called Time Out for Trivia, where we would ask questions, people would win prizes. It was a lot of fun.
I bet people love that stuff, and secretly they don't want to talk about it, but they do love sports trivia. They have all this mountain of knowledge in the back of their head they don't even realize it's there, and it pops out at their worst times.
Yes, definitely. But that was a fun job until CNBC bought our company and just fired everybody. So we were all out of work. Thank you.
Kind of makes it not fun anymore.
No, that sucked the trivia right out of me. That was not fun.
So you had time behind the camera and in front of the camera before you started your podcast, and of course your documentary filmmaking. Was it an easy transition?
I think it was. I think there's downsides when you're in front of the camera. You first of all, you always have to look good. You have to maintain a certain, not like you and I look right now, but just you have to be presentable. You have to wear a lot of makeup. You have to be concerned about wardrobe and all those things. And then people know who you are whenever you're out and about, so that's, you get rewarded for it financially, but you also have to put up with all that stuff. When you're just a podcaster or a film director or whatever, you're a little more behind the scenes. And I enjoy that. So you get a little combination of both. I mean, for our podcast is on video, but I'm wearing a t-shirt. I don't have any makeup on, so which is probably scary to people that are watching, but it's just different. I guess different would be the word.
Yeah, I like the podcasting realm. I just started going into the video side of it about a month and a half ago. A guest actually recommended it to me. He said, "Your podcast that needs to be on video." I said, "I don't think I look good enough for video, but whatever, we'll do it." And I just started doing it this way. It's actually easier to record this way, so I have a better time this way. Like you said, it's easier. Not a lot of stress in a podcast, and the anonymity of the audio side is perfect.
Yeah, it's a different standard to what you have to be presenting when you're on there, but it certainly helps for marketing it and having people know the face behind the voice. But as you probably know, I mean, I don't know how long you've been doing it. It's a challenge finding an audience for a podcast. I mean, there's like 2 million people that are podcasting. Now there's hundreds of millions that are listening. So that's the good news.
Right.
But the bad news is you got to come up with a way to get people to hear your message and hope that they get into listening to your program. That's the challenge. It's the same with anything. It's just on a smaller scale than the news business.
Right. And like you said, the pool is very deep here with podcasting, and everyone thinks when you start, you're going to be Joe Rogan right away. There's only room for one Joe Rogan, and he has a big money pot. So
yeah, and everybody thinks that everybody that has an iPhone thinks they're a filmmaker. It's like everybody. The good news is social media opens up opportunities for everybody. The bad news is it opens up opportunities for everybody. And some things should be, not everybody can do everything. It's like there may be a guy that's a great accountant or a woman that's a great accountant or designer or doctor. That doesn't mean they're a good communicator on camera. So everybody has their own skill set. The nice thing about podcasts is it allows you to try things and find it. I don't think you should be locked into any one thing just because that's what you're doing. And so, somebody like Joe Rogan, his background, whatever he was doing before, look at how he's turned that into a successful business. Right. And it's pretty amazing. And that's what everybody shoots for. They go, I want to be like that. Why not?
I want to do it without having to eat rats on Fear Factor. That's all I want to do.
There's some things we just won't do to be successful.
I'll stop the line right there. I'm not eating a rat. I'm good.
Yes. That's where I draw the line.
If I have to, I guess, but to live, maybe.
I won't do it. I was on one of those airboats in the swamps of Louisiana. We were doing a travel show, And they were telling me that people along the coast of Louisiana and Texas all catch the rats and cook them. I think it's called Nutra or
I guess
something
it,
along those
yeah.
lines. That just made me sick. There's nothing I want that badly where that's going to become appealing to me.
When I think of rats, I think of the ones I grew up with when I was living in New Jersey and seeing the ones in the New York City subway that are bigger than me sometimes. I'm good. They can stay down there in the tracks. I'll stay up here. I'll throw
I
them
was
a hot
crossing the
dog.
street one time in New York and somebody yelled, "Hey, look out." And this line of rats were running down along the curb, right below the top of the sidewalk. And it's like, wow, I could have stepped in that. That would have been
And then they went
screaming like a
every
little
one of them would have
child.
bit you.
Yeah. I wouldn't have handled that well at all. There's no doubt.
Keep my shoe, and run away.
Yeah, I would be running away and crying.
So I think your one documentary on License to Parent, that's spot on target. We need a license to drive, need a license to carry a gun, a license for almost anything, but anyone can be a parent. And I think with that one there, I'm sure there's people think it's controversial, but I think it's something that needs to be said. And how did you come on that topic?
Well, you just see so many examples of bad parenting in the news all the time. And, it's who do you blame? Is it the child's fault? Is it the parent's fault? And it's like, I always say to people, if you had to take a test to become a parent, you had to pass the test, do you think they would have let you have children? And the answer is probably in a lot of cases, no, they would not. But people in a country where we're so strong on our rights, we have the right to do anything we want. Everybody thinks, and I'm not suggesting, the film ultimately does not suggest you should have a license. It's more of a be aware of what you're doing and the responsibility. It's not just a few years responsibility. It doesn't stop when the child's 18. That's your kid for life. That doesn't mean you have to support them, but what you do with that child and put out into the world has a cost to society. If you raise a good kid, they're proactive and contribute to society and have a value where society makes money from them. If it's a bad child, the cost is over the top bad for what they cost society. I think it's like, it could be 1.4 million. I don't even remember the statistic, but the cost of turning out a bad child is unbelievable. And you see examples of, tragic shootings in schools and things that happen. And you can't always just point towards the parent. I know in the last one you probably can because they bought the kid the gun. But in some instances, parents can't control everything. But you certainly see examples of when they could have been more involved. Even the Gabby Petito case with the parents for Brian Laundrie. What did they know? What did they do? They let their kid go out into the woods with a gun when he was obviously unstable because he killed that girl. And man, what kind of parenting is that? Are you a parent? Do you have kids?
I have one daughter, she's 25.
Yeah. I mean, I think about what I would do if I was in that situation. And I really think I would have turned my child in and hoped they could have gotten help. So those are the bad examples. But then there's just examples of, people who let their children grow up and do whatever they want. And then they go out into society and do whatever they want. And the point is, we need to support parents more. We need to have more parental education. We need to make it more of a community thing so we can help each other, because the people next door to me, their children are going to affect all of us. They're getting in cars and driving. They're going to be out in the community, and people need to take the job really seriously because it does affect everybody. We're not living on compounds out in the woods where if you lived in one of those, you could do anything you want until those kids start wandering into town. And then it becomes everybody else's problem.
Then it becomes a we problem, not just a you problem at that point.
Exactly. Yep.
That's a good point. That both those cases, last week's case especially was horrible. Like you said, the parents, it's all lines point to them buying that gun, giving it to him, and then fleeing. They fled after he was arrested, which is, that's textbook I'm guilty right there. And then,
well, they could get a longer jail sentence than him. Right. I mean, if you think about it, it's like, who's getting their kid weapons like that and then telling them to hide the fact that they want to look for ammunition for it and everything? It's like, wow, sometimes you just have to raise your hand and go, I got a problem here, help. And other kids are dead because of that. It's heartbreaking.
Because you failed many easy things you could have done right there to stop that. And then I don't want him kicked out of school right now. He's staying in school. That goes to not just the parents, but the administrators too, for not making sure he left the school that day.
Yeah. And I don't want to make it seem like we're saying every bad kid is because of a bad parent. That's
No.
not the case. Sometimes there's just bad seeds that happen, and sometimes it's environmental, and there's a whole bunch of different reasons. But if there's obvious ones, that's part of parenting. You have to hoist the flag and say, I need help here. This is a problem, and I'm concerned of what this could do to anybody else. And you have to be thinking beyond yourself and your own situation, because tragically other lives were lost because of that. And it's just like I say, it just leaves you with a sick feeling.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said earlier, you have your neighbors' kids that also affect your kids. It takes the whole community to raise a child. So if you're raising yours right, it'll spread to those other kids. If their parents are doing it right, it's all going to spread to better, productive children as they go into society. And you can ease back. Like you said, we don't quit at 18. You kind of ease back a little bit. You don't have to give as much anymore, but you're not going to let them fail either. You're going to, hey, reel them back in. You want to stop what you're doing and think about what's going on right now and reevaluate and go forward. Or I think some parents, they have that mindset, 18 and done. That's when I had to lose my tax break. You're out of here.
Yeah, it's a lifelong commitment. And I think if you were going to do something, any kind of task, and someone said, okay, now wait a second, before you do this, I want you to know you're going to be responsible in some way for this for your entire life. Maybe some people would pump the brakes a little bit, not be having children. And then, how many children do people have, and how many are you capable of taking care of? That's all part of it. And you don't want to tell somebody, hey, you can only have two. You can only, government shouldn't be in our faces telling us much of anything, but we have to be responsible for doing our jobs well. And the better we can do our jobs, the less opportunity it is for other people to tell us how we have to do our jobs. But you leave that void where, okay, George isn't doing very well, we better step in and help him. Okay, now there's a problem. So that should be incentive enough for people to want to do well, just to keep government out of their lives. Definitely.
Then, of course, on your other documentary, Last House Standing, I'm sure a lot of people gave you feedback on that one, because everyone has opinions on that whole society, that whole world of the disaster, and the leaning into it and getting prepared. What was your biggest critics of that?
The critics weren't as big on that as they would be with License to Parent, because License to Parent automatically makes you go, wait a second, you can't license me. Everybody should be able to sit down and go, we want safer houses.
Right.
So who might be against the Last House Standing? Maybe builders, because they lobby to have building standards lower. They don't want, when you say if you puff your chest out and go, hey, I build to code, thank you very much. That house isn't probably worth it, because we need to exceed the code in a lot of areas. And that should be the goal. Just saying I build a code, there's a lot of places with pretty lax building codes. So it could be builders. I don't think we really bash realtors. What we're really encouraging in the film is that people take control of their destiny and don't reward mediocrity. Don't, especially in such a competitive market, if you don't buy the house, somebody else is going to buy it. But at least draw the line yourself, and don't buy a crappy house for the wrong reasons. Get it inspected, find out what the vulnerabilities are, make sure you have the right insurance. So I don't think it was people can't really be against that film. They could just say, it's overreach. We don't need tighter codes and all this stuff, but the statistics don't lie. All you have to do is look at all the damage. Moore, Oklahoma got hit over a course of like 8 or 10 years, 4 EF4 or 5 tornadoes, powerful tornadoes. It took 4 of them for them to change the building code.
Wow.
But they finally did. And what they did was they made garage doors stronger. They made different bracketing on the houses to attach to the foundation and to the seal, to the roof. So now, again, if you're in the bullseye of a major tornado, that sucks, and it's probably not going to go well. But if you live a mile to the right or a mile to the left or even less, the wind is significantly lower away from the center of the tornado. And those houses are surviving now. So you can cut down on the amount of damage. And then everybody in a tornado area, and it's a very small percentage that actually do. I don't know why they don't have storm cellars, because that can make the difference between living and dying in a storm. It'll be interesting when they investigate the places where all the loss of life was. What was their evacuation? What was their warning? How could people have done it differently to not have so many lives lost from that? And it's going to be a long time sorting all that out.
And like the one place in Kentucky was a candle factory, 110 workers were missing that they can't find.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
But where was the siren to warn people, and where would they have gone if there was?
Exactly.
The problem is when you don't have a disaster for a long period of time, you get a little lax in how you would handle that disaster. And this is armchair quarterbacking, and I'm not suggesting, well, everybody could have survived or anything like that. I think we'll have to find this out. What were this is where the work is done now to find out how things could have gone differently and if lives could have been saved. But all those things are important. You know, when you have an apartment complex, where do people evacuate? Some of the buildings they're building in Oklahoma had safe rooms down below it where 100, 150 people could go. So the people in the apartment would evacuate underneath the building where they would be safe. And those kind of things need to be thought of in every situation. And when you don't, it ends up going badly. A disaster eventually seems to find most places. It's just a matter of when. So everybody should be focused on having a plan. Even if it's a sunny day and you go, it never is going to happen here, it doesn't mean it won't.
In the late 90s, I was stationed right here in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and I got orders to go to Kansas. And I said, oh, great, we're going to Tornado Alley. I've never been in a tornado. I've been in hurricanes and stuff on the East Coast. I said, I know that stuff. So let me research tornadoes. So I started looking things up on tornadoes, what to do. Like you said, storm shelters and stuff like that. 2 weeks before we left here, a tornado hit here. So we got to witness one right here, see the devastating effects right here in Clarksville, Tennessee. And then I went to Kansas and not one hit the whole time I was there. I said, that's insane. And then I leave and one hits there.
Well, it's just luck, good luck or bad luck. You know, when I was in Oklahoma a bunch of times when we were shooting the film and I did another project there, a lot of the people I met had never seen a tornado. And you would think, wow, Oklahoma, they're probably dodging tornadoes every day. They see them all the time. So not everybody does. It's a small percentage of places that get hit by them. But when they get hit by them, it's a big deal. You know, it's like the odds of a hurricane hitting you aren't that great. But when it happens, it wipes out the whole area if it's bad. So you have to think forward to how would we handle that situation? What is our plan? And like I say, I don't know how often schools practice fire drills. I know sadly now they practice lockdowns for potential terrorist activity, but you really have to do that with the attitude that you take it seriously too, because It could be the difference between life or death. And it's hard to get people to take something serious until it happens. And then it's too late. So we have to find a way to make people more alert on the front side. We need to be proactive, can be a lot less expensive than being reactive after any type of disaster.
Exactly. And like you said, if it's not happening in your house, you're not concerned about it until it actually does. And that's when it's too late for a lot of people. And that's the sad truth about a lot of things in life here.
Yeah, it is. It's human nature. You know, it's like we don't think something bad is going to happen. Nobody leaves the house and goes, I think I'm going to get in a car accident today. But when you do, you hope that your seatbelt was on, that your airbag works, that your car lives up to the standard that was set for it. Well, I think more thought goes into our cars than our houses a lot of times. So you obviously don't want to be in that car in a tornado. But my point is, people are more concerned about that. They want to know, what did Consumer Reports say about it? They're not going to find out what it said about their house. They probably don't even know. They're just trusting the person that made it. And I can't tell you how many times we see crappy construction where you didn't get the best effort on that house. And unless you inspect the heck out of it, you're not going to know.
Right, definitely. And if you, like you said, most people, they look at a car, they'll come out with a printout from their pocket. Well, this says Consumer Reports said it was built for this and would stand a hit at 45 miles an hour at this angle. So the airbag should work and employ. But they walk into a house, oh, it's pretty, let's buy it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know that you could say, well, there's they get a Carfax report on a car. What about on a house? And yeah, they're supposed to disclose stuff. But how many people have a builder ever say, yeah, this house is crap, buy it? All our trash from every worker threw their lunch sacks in the wall, and it's going to rot in 5 years. But go ahead, it's a great house and great neighborhood.
It's going to be wonderful.
Yeah, you'll love it. Yeah, if it rains, if you get a couple inches of rain, it's going to leak, but looks good on a sunny day. Nobody's going to tell you that. You got to do your own due diligence. You have to be your own best advocate.
Definitely, and that's a great point. And I think many homeowners, especially initial homeowners, they need to learn that before they go into the process of buying. There's a lot of people, I want to get out of this apartment. I want to pay my own rent. I don't want to pay someone else's mortgage. I'm going to pay my own, and just rush into something, and they wind up with a disaster waiting to happen.
Well, apartments can be more dangerous than houses because a lot of those are wood
Yes.
buildings, and those things just become projectiles in a big storm. And people assume that they're insured because they're living in somebody else's apartment, but that may cover putting that building back, but nothing inside that apartment is covered by the owner of the building.
Right.
So you need to have renter's insurance. You need to know your evacuation plan. And in a lot of those buildings, I sure as hell would not want to be there in a hurricane, the danger of fire. You know, are there sprinklers working? Are the stairwells concrete? You know, what's the plan for the elevator if there's a fire? There's so many things you need to know, because we saw last year with that building that collapsed in South Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just negligence at its best or worst. Yeah. But I mean, an example of negligence of people knew that building had problems, but still you think, yeah, it's not going to happen to me. And that's just horrible what happened there. I mean, it's just, you can't even imagine what that was like for those people. It's just bad.
That was probably the worst way in the world to get woken up if they were asleep at the time. Feel like an earthquake and your whole building falling down right in front of you or with you in it.
Yeah, the story of this one woman who woke up and she was on the phone with her husband, who I think was out of town, and she was talking to him about, she just saw the pool collapse, and then the phone went dead because the building collapsed and she died.
Wow.
And that's just, wow. I mean, we're talking about so many sad things, but if people just realize that if you're in a building that looks like it has problems, demand that it get inspected, demand that something is done, because how many people were there that assumed that the people in charge were looking out for them, and they weren't.
Right. And when you demand those inspections, have an outside person do the inspection, not someone from the builder or the building management do it, because then you're just going to get whatever they want them to say.
Yeah, we put so much trust in people assuming that they're doing their jobs. And if you think about it, that's pretty crazy.
Definitely.
Yeah. So that's why I encourage people to find out answers for themselves. And if you have a condo board, demand that they find out the answers, demand that the inspections are done. In a house, you can control that more in a house. That's the downside of a condo. You know, in Hurricane Michael, we interviewed a woman who lived in a duplex, and the half that was the most destroyed was the person living next to her. And they said they just disappeared. They didn't come back. So she can't rebuild or get money to fix her unit because they can't just fix half of a duplex. So now she had to sell it for a few $1,000s. She lost a fortune getting rid of it because it was never going to be rebuilt again. So even something as simple as that, if you're in a townhouse community and they're all connected, you're only as good as the house next to you. And what is the policy for rebuilding if something bad happens there? Most people don't think about that. And we saw in Panama City, which is adjacent to Mexico Beach, that a lot of people should have thought about that. And it's usually people without the most financial means that are the most victimized by it. Because somebody wealthy, when you lose all your possessions, that sucks no matter how wealthy you are. Your heirlooms and things that you've had from a child, but at least you might have a means to get your life back together. For somebody who is heavily leveraged to get into that place, that could mean the difference between how the rest of their life goes and being able to recover. So, you know, everybody's got to be on their A game and do as much as they can to try to avoid those things happening to them.
Exactly. Yeah. And George, where can people find this information from you? Is it on the movetheworldfilms.org site?
Yeah, if you go to movetheworldfilms.org, you can find our podcast. You can find both of my films that are for rent on the website. And it also has a link to my other website for The Last House Standing. It's thelasthousestanding.org. And there's a resource page on there that I encourage everybody to check out, because you can get a lot of great information about how you can have your house inspected and do things to try to be as safe as possible. But on movetheworldfilms.org, that's where you can see the podcast, sign up to get the latest information. We have a monthly newsletter where we're not marketing you anything other than information that you might find interesting. And I just encourage people to check it out. I'd love for them to check out the podcast, check out the films, and you can email me. Let me know your thoughts. If you have ideas of things you want to see or things you don't agree with, I'm open-minded. If there's something I did wrong and I missed it, tell me, because I'd like to get it right the next time.
Or if they have something of value that you can add in to add more value to your work, that'd be awesome as well.
Absolutely. It's been established time and again, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I will learn. So if there's something I need to fix, I want to fix it.
Definitely. I think we're all that way. George, thanks again for taking some of your time to be on the Misfit Nation, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Awesome.